There we go. This is Jamie from Blood, Sweat and Metal, the Australian Metal Podcast. I'm doing a bucket list interview right now. I'm talking to a member that joined the Ramones back in 1989 and it went right through to 1996. He's coming to Australia and I'm talking to the bass player CJ Ramone. How's it going, CJ?
It's going really well. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, I've been hearing there's a bit of a wild weather over there, and I hope you guys stay safe over there. But we're so surprised that you're coming back to Australia after so many years of when you came with the Ramones in the 90s, but now you're coming out on your own with some special guests that joining you on the bill. Let's talk about that. What are you expecting, and you're looking forward to that tour that's coming up?
Well, I always said from the first time I was over to New Zealand and Australia, if they ever chase me out of the U.S., that's where I'd head to. I've always really dug it there, and I've been, believe it or not, I've been trying since I guess about 2008, 2009 is when I came back into music after taking off for a lot of years to start a family and whatnot. But I was dying to get back there, and I was doing my best to do it, but I just couldn't find the right situation. But last year, I got signed to Fat Records, and since then the offers have been coming in. So it's, we were lucky enough. First tour we're doing for 2015 is New Zealand and Australia. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I've got to say I've been a fan since I was 10 years of age of the Ramones, and just going to see you coming back for the very first time. I haven't seen you live before because I was too young at the stage with the Ramones, but now I'm in an adulthood life now. I'm going to see you for the very first time. What are we expecting? Are we expecting some classic Ramones and some of your solo stuff as well?
Yeah, well, I actually have I've put out 2 albums. In 2012, I put out Ray Conquista, but I did it through a crowdfunding site, and it was a very low volume release. I didn't have a record company behind me to get me the press and all that stuff. But so that one came out in 2012, and then last year, 2014, in November, I put out Last Chance to Dance. So I'll be doing songs off of both of those records, and then of course a lot of classic Ramones songs, and including stuff that I never got to play with the Ramones, some of my favorites I never got to play with the Ramones, and some songs that the Ramones never played live. So
Sweet, because the history speaks itself. The Ramones were inducted into the Hall of Fame many years ago, and Johnny and Dee Dee and all the boys, including yourself, just basically got together in the 80s and went out and do the second, I'll call it the second chapter of the Ramones before they retired, and now you're coming back out doing it all over again for the fans. And you mentioned just then you're doing New Zealand and Australia for the first time on this leg of the tour. We can't wait. We really cannot wait.
I'm really looking forward to it myself. It's I've had some of my most epic drinking sessions in Australia and New Zealand, so I'm expected to have a few more. I'm a couple of years down the road from the last time I was there, but I still got some skills. So. Yeah,
I want to ask, let's go back to when you first joined the Ramones. Let's talk about the transition. How was it for you joining the Ramones after them being out for about 20 years, almost 20 years, but you coming in to replace a member of the band? How was that for you, playing your very first gig with the Ramones?
Yeah, it was a really odd transition. And the other thing you have to remember, too, is I was in the military up until I got into the Ramones. I went 5 weeks out of the Marine Corps. I was on stage in Leicester, England, September 30th, 1989, doing my first show with them, 5 weeks after getting out of the Marine Corps. So it was, that alone was a big transition. But, the thing that made it the most bearable was that I never tried to replace Dee Dee or be Dee Dee or make people forget about Dee Dee. Dee Dee he is the genesis of all punk rock bass players. He invented it. He invented the style, the look, everything. It was all Dee Dee. I just came in and being coming out of the military, very mission oriented. I just looked at it as, my mission was to make sure I got on stage and played the best I could and put on the best show I possibly could. That's how I looked at it. I put the whole thing of replacing Dee Dee out of my head. And of course, you can't totally ignore it, but it made it a lot easier on me not trying to be Dee Dee and just being myself. And that's really what helped me survive the transition over. And in the beginning, it wasn't it wasn't the king's welcome that I got. I got covered in spit every night, pelted with handfuls of coins, bottles, shoes, everything you can imagine. I came off stage looking like I just went 3 rounds with the champ most nights. It was not it was more trial by fire than anything else. But I preferred it that way, because if I had come in and people just accepted me from the get-go, it wouldn't have meant as much. But the fact that people weren't willing to just give me a pass because I got into the band really made it mean something to me. And that's, that also helped, believe it or not. That also helped me feel at home a little bit quicker.
Yeah, it's not just the Ramones, or not just for yourself, but any other band that replaced a member, they go through the same type of process what you just mentioned. I mean, I remember when AC/DC replaced Bon Scott. I wouldn't be surprised if Brian Johnson went through the same thing. But look at the album that came out in 1980, Black in Black. It's one of the best albums.
That's right. Yep. And that album is as classic as any album they ever put out.
Yeah.
And I was a huge Bon Scott fan. I mean, it was a big thing when it came out that Bon Scott died and they were going to continue on, because in my mind, I thought nobody's going to be able to pull that off. Nobody's got a voice like that guy. And, to me, Bon Scott's in the top 3 frontmen of all time. You know what I mean? And that's not a joke. He sincerely is in the top 3 frontmen of all time. But it's, that just shows you that if you find the right guy and you come out with a strong album, you can make the transition a hell of a lot easier. There's also been bands that could not make that transition. When Van Halen got rid of David Lee Roth and they brought in Sammy Hagar, there were hordes of fans that just never would accept Sammy Hagar. So there's success stories and there's failures out there too. So
yeah, and you just mentioned I'm a Van Halen fan, but it's also the new fan jumped on board when Sammy Hagar came in and they made hit singles. I'm not saying with David Lee Roth, Lee Roth they didn't, but there was a new transition, a new change, a new lineup, probably more radio friendly, if you want to say that. But
they picked up a whole new audience when he came in. You know what I mean? They picked up a whole new audience, and that's there's something to be said for that too. You know what I mean? I'm sure a lot of people didn't whenever something like that happens within the organization, you always have the ones who are for it and the ones who are against it. When Dee Dee left the band, everyone told Johnny you should just break the band up, or get somebody from another famous band. But Johnny refused, and he stuck to his own plan, and apparently he was right. The Ramones had their most successful years while I was in the band, and that's not to say that they got more successful because I was in the band. They got more successful and toured more because there was less internal conflict, and the record company got excited about them again, and the press, it was something for the press to talk about again. Everybody, I think was rooting for the Ramones all along, but they were fighting a lot of internal conflict and stuff like that. Once Dee Dee was gone, it freed up the band to tour as often as it wanted to, and that's why they had their most successful years while I was there. And that's not to say they had their best albums or their best songs or they were the best looking at that point. But, the fact of the matter is they toured more in the first year that I was there than they did in the 3 before I got there. So.
Of course. And the Ramones, and I'll put you in with the Ramones because you were a member, but the Ramones have influenced a lot of bands over the years. But I just want to ask, has anyone actually came up to you and say, thank you for influencing me to picking up a bass or to sing or to just go out there and record in a band? Has anyone actually come up to you?
Yep, and that's the biggest compliment that you can ever get is when somebody tells you, I started playing bass or I started singing or I started playing guitar or drums because of you. There's no bigger compliment, and especially because for me it was a lot different. Like I said, I came in to do a job. I kept my focus, and I always stayed focused on that. And I never expected that I would be hearing that someday, or anybody would ever say that to me. That was just, and I think the reason why it did happen is because I stayed focused and I did concentrate on making sure that I put on a good show every night. And I think that came across to the fans, and I'm always happy to get that compliment. That's the best one that anyone can give you.
Exactly, and I want to put praise to you because you have basically take the mantle. The torch was passed on to you, but as saying that, you always remain humble and true to yourself. If you change the character, well, things start to fall apart. But you stay true to yourself. You've done a job like any other member would. It's a job. You go out there, perform, and you get the dividends at the end of it.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough though that I did not come up in. I didn't come up like in a band and have success when I was young and all that stuff. I had already worked a whole bunch of blue collar jobs. I had been in the military. My character was already there. You know what I mean? And that's that I didn't allow it to change. And that doesn't mean I didn't have my rock star moments. I would be full of shit if I didn't say straight out. I had my rock star moments. There were days when I had been out partying all night and I was super hungover and all I wanted to do was get a meal and blew a fit because we didn't have time to stop for a meal. Or, in fact, in Australia, I got in trouble with the band because I wanted to go out and go bungee jumping one time, and I was waiting in the lobby to get picked up by the company, and Monty came down, the tour manager, and was like, "You're not allowed to go bungee jumping." And I was like, "Fuck you, I'm going bungee jumping." And then he called Johnny's room, and then Johnny came down and was like, "What do you think you're doing? What if something happens to you? You get hurt. The whole tour's don't know." So I had my rock star moments for sure. But for the most part, I really did, I got up there and did my best every night and tried not to give the band too many hassles. And, and that's not to say I just kept my mouth shut and took everything on the chin. I spoke up when I thought they were wrong or when they asked my opinion. And, we had our disagreements and had our fights, but it's just like any other family. You fight harder with your family members than you do with people on the outside, and that's just how life is. It's when you're close with somebody, you're willing to sometimes, push the boundaries of what you actually should say, because that they're not going anywhere, that you need each other, and you take, you kind of take advantage of that sometimes.
Yeah, and what you just said about want to go out to do bungee jumping, that's like me. I want to take risks, and if I get into trouble, I get into trouble. And you're saying that you might get into trouble for saying or being outspoken or whatever. I'm always outspoken. If I want to say something, I'll say something. If I get into trouble, I'll pay the consequences. Stuff you. Yep. I'll do it. But
and as long as you're willing to take it on the chin in the end, as long as you're willing to put up with the consequences, nobody can say anything about it. If you're the type of person, you do what you want and then you whine about it afterwards when it don't work out, that's one thing. But if you're willing to take the consequences for it, then more power to you.
Yeah. You've been in the military. I just got to ask this: have you seen The American Sniper, and what's your views on that story? I haven't seen it yet. I just want your opinion for being in the military.
Yeah, I didn't really see it so much as like a military movie as much as I did like, what the consequences of war is on an individual. You know what I mean? When you have somebody that goes out there and is, and is taking lives, and regardless of how easy it is or how much they say, "Oh, it's my job and I have to do it," that there is a price to pay for it eventually. And that guy almost paid by losing his family and himself. But he was, his character was strong enough that he came back and he put his life back together. Unfortunately, he got killed trying to help out a fellow vet, but, it doesn't diminish what he did in his life. And that was his job. His job was to protect the other military guys, and he did his job, and apparently he did it really well. But I know there's a really big like anti-military swing going on in our country right now, and especially like in the media and stuff like that. Like people are really kind of lining up against the wars over there and everything else. But you're always going to have that. There's always going to be some people who understand, why we go to war, and other people who, even though they understand it, they just think it's wrong at all costs. But we're in an odd position in the States. Everybody hates us until they need us, and it seems like this is just another one of those situations where we're using the resources that we have to try to make a situation better. Unfortunately, we don't. Sometimes we lack the we lack the ability to follow through on things that we get started, and this is just another one of those things. Pulling out of Iraq and Afghanistan and all that stuff. We're really leaving those people in a bad spot, and a lot of people here, believe it or not, know that, and they feel it, and would be for staying there until those places get on their feet, but. That's a very, very, very long process. It's a real long process, which is one of the points that they made in that movie. One of the points they made in that movie is that, you get involved in something like that, it's not an easy thing, an easy fix. The military can only do so much. There's got to be stuff going on in other places, to secure a country from terrorists and give it a new start. But, I think. Overall, I think that movie had a good message. I think it said a lot of good things in it, and anybody who doesn't like it probably is just like an anti-war type of person, and that's you're never gonna convince them of anything.
No, and the reason why I bring up the military, my relatives and my father was in the military as well, and my great uncle Eli fought in the World War over in Bathsheba. It was the Light Horseman Brigade, and all that. So
that's cool.
The reason why I bring it up is my family is all part of the Marines, but it's the armed forces, I call it. But
I just got to tell you one thing before you jump off there. In the U.S. military, the Australians and the New Zealanders are really highly respected. You guys have reputations of being really super tough and really knowledgeable in the field. So. And I know that from when I was in, whenever I heard anybody talking about you guys or the New Zealanders, it was always what a tough lot you are. So. Yeah,
and it just goes to show that we are brothers in arms. We always look after our neighbours and our allied forces, and we're always there to do the job. And it's great to see that we're joining up with America and other countries as well, but it's there. I mean, we just had a terrorist type of act here in Sydney just before Christmas, and that went well. We didn't call the armed forces; the police done their job. It was a religious politics stuff, but that's all sorted. That's all done and dusted. But we should never. I say this, and I always say this to my loved ones: do not turn a blind eye, because it will take you out of your misery. Once you take your eyes off it for a split second, they will attack, and that's what happened. That's what happened.
You can either deal with it now or you deal with it later, and it's always better to deal with it now and get it over up front. That's just a fact.
Yeah, it is. I want to go back onto music. Over the years of you performing and that, have there been a band that you've been paying attention to in the punk scene?
Right now, who do I like?
Yeah.
There's a band called the Mean Jeans. They're from, I think they're from Portland, Oregon. They are about as close to that like traditional Ramones style punk rock as you could possibly get. I went to see them a couple of months ago for the first time, and they were really great live. In fact, we're talking with them now about possibly putting a tour together. So So, I mean, they're a perfect match for us stylistically. We really fit well together. But they're a really good band I like. There's another band called the Black Lips. They've been around for a long time, but they're they're pretty crazy. I like them a lot too. There's another LA band called Fidlar, Fidlar, that I like a lot. But realistically, the older I get, the more I find myself listening to the stuff I listened to when I was younger, and I still listen to the Ramones a lot. I still listen to Black Sabbath a lot. I grew up a total metalhead. I played in all metal bands and stuff when I was younger, and the fact that I could play every song off of any Iron Maiden album up to Power Slave made me a highly sought after bass player in my little area there. But I grew up total metalhead. So, but I always loved punk too. It's just there were no punks in my town. There was 2 other guys in my town that listened to punk, and other than that, it was me. So that's it was kind of by default.
A question I'd like to ask you, what do you think bands do not last a standard time, especially with the longevity thing? Is it the politics behind the band members or the market, or what is it? What do you think breaks a band up and make the band do not stand the test of time?
There's a lot of things that affect it really. It's you have the interpersonal relationships and stuff going on there, but a lot of it is I'll put it to you this way. Here in New York, everything is super trendy. Musical styles go in and out as quickly as summer fashions do. That's how bad it is in New York. It really is like that, and that has a huge effect on bands. If you're a New York band, it's really hard to have any type of long-term career if you're not following the styles and jumping from one thing to another. It's really it's a hard juggling act to maintain. But it used to be here in the States, a band, there would be a small scene that would start in an individual city. You can look at Seattle as the last big one. So you had Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and all these bands from that city that kind of broke and got big. And then the record companies swooped in and signed up every band from Seattle, and then started signing up all the bands that even sounded like Seattle bands. And and that would ride its course, and it would take a couple of years for that sound or that that particular style to to run through the machine and come out on the other side ground up and the remnants of it keep going, but for the most part the rest of it is gone, and then another scene would take over. But realistically, Seattle was the last scene to happen like that. And it's and now the problem is there really isn't any individual scene that really happens that way anymore. I think it's because in the days of when the record companies were at their height and MTV and all of that stuff, they swooped in on these cities when the scenes were still in their infancy, when they were still just forming, and they just destroyed them before they had a chance to mature and grow and really become good. They just started signing up anything that sounded slightly different, and that started that whole trend of like, it's almost like a lack of attention span type of thing. And that carried over so much that when the record companies and stuff went under, now people just buy individual songs. They're not necessarily into bands, they're into songs. Yeah. And it's really made it hard. And the whole, music download thing, making music for free and all that really changed things up so much that it's really hard to even to make a living doing music. It's really become difficult because basically, you know, there's a lot of bands that tour now, so clubs don't pay real good, and the records aren't worth anything. Your CDs and well, the good thing is vinyl. Kids are buying vinyl again, which is great. And there's you know, but the costs of getting the vinyl yourself kind of squash the profit margin a bit. But and not that it's about money or anything else, but the fact of the matter is you have to be able to make a living doing it if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So that's the whole industry kind of got into turmoil, and that's why you see trends just come and go so quickly in musical styles, big for just a couple of weeks and then gone, and it's really it really got turned on its head, and nobody's quite figured out what to do with it next. And there's always the new thing that's gonna, it's gonna make it better or whatever, blah blah blah. But I mean, as far as I could see, it's really pretty disorganized. It's and just not profitable.
Yeah, you mentioned that many people are just there for the singles now, especially on iTunes. I just read an article early today about the digital iTunes are lacking sales more than the CDs now. Maybe, people have really gone. It's kind of a pushback against technology. You know what I mean? It really is. It's just like when I was a kid, I always loved vinyl, and I hated 8-tracks. And then they came out with cassettes, and cassettes were really, really, really convenient because you could put them in your car, you could record your own stuff, but I always liked vinyl. And then it moved to CDs, and I never really liked CDs. I never liked the way they sounded. And then it moved to the digital thing, and that was convenient again. It was like the cassette thing again, but I still didn't like the sound. But now, the big pushback, the kids are like, we don't want that crap. We want vinyl. We want something real. We want a package that when we buy it, we're getting something substantial with big artwork and the lyric sheets and, a piece of vinyl is something you can hold in your hands and it's, big and it's got weight to it and you put the needle on and it's more organic and that's really what it is now. It's a pushback against all the technology. And really, I sell more vinyl than I do anything else. Yeah. The question, I collect the 180 gram vinyl, the new 180 gram now.
Right.
I do have the original vinyl, but I want to ask you, have you collected the 180 gram vinyls? And if so, is there any sound different from your ears, whether listen to the old 75 or 78 records compared to the today technology of the vinyl?
I don't hear that much of a difference, but that being said, my ears are. I was a machine gunner in the Marine Corps, so between that. Between my short stint with the Marines and my years of standing next to Johnny's amp on 10 on my side of the stage, my hearing is very diminished, and I have tinnitus like mad. But the 180 grain vinyl, I own a couple of pieces of it, and I can obviously hear a difference, but I don't hear that big of a difference to me. I don't hear that much of a difference. It's definitely there, and I understand why people would prefer it, but it's just not big enough for me to get excited about. But, to tell you the truth, I prefer that old, like I have original release Black Sabbath records that still pop and have all the little clicks, and I love that when I put the needle on and I hear that. I love that. That's part of it. That's part of the experience, Yeah. But yeah, I know that's a big thing now, the 180 gram.
Yeah, and I like the old 45 when you just get a single and just put on the old 45 and just crank it up to 10. Now it's very rare. I mean, I know bands are bringing out singles on vinyl, the new 180 gram. I haven't got that stage yet. I haven't bought the singles yet. I want to test it out because I'm always experimenting. If you go to my dad's place, there's vinyls galore. I used to collect the cassette tapes you mentioned before, the CDs as well. Now I'm back to the 180 gram, but I want to go back to the singles on the vinyls. I want to go back and compare the difference with the ones I have originally to the ones I've got now. And I'm looking forward to it. I haven't done it just yet.
Right.
And especially, I want to ask this question. Is the market out there for you to bring out new material? Like, I know you sign up with another label now, but is the market big enough worldwide for you?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And you know, the thing about it is like, I'm doing, you know, I'm doing the music that I do. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to write Ramones music. I'm not trying to sound like the Ramones or fool anybody into thinking that, you know, I am, if you come to my show, you're going to see the Ramones or see something comparable to the Ramones. That's not what I'm doing. You know, I'm just writing songs, and if they're good, they go on the record. But with that being said, you have to remember, I was a huge Ramones fan as a kid. I was a huge Ramones fan. Dee Dee was my idol when I was a kid. And after that, I played in a band for 7 years. Yeah. I am obviously very influenced by the Ramones. If you listen to my music, you can hear it, you know. Yep. But it does not sound like I'm trying to sound like the Ramones, in my opinion. It doesn't sound like that at all. You can hear the influence, but it's not like I'm sitting down and putting on Rocket to Russia and going, I have to make Rocket to Russia. I have to make this record. I'm going to write a song that sounds like every song on that record. That's not what I try to do, you know.
Yeah.
And that being said, the Ramones sound is, to me, you know, changed rock and roll forever. The Ramones sound was a revolutionary sound.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I'm doing is just trying to, not even trying to. What I feel like is going on with my music is I'm hoping that if that sound kicked off a big revolution once, it can do it again. And I'm really hoping that, you know, I can win enough people over and get enough young kids to pay attention and be like, that's what it's about, you know? And,
exactly.
You know, to me, the major problem is that, at least here in the States, kids live in a digital world. You know what I mean? They live in a world of video games and texting and all that stuff. And it's almost like they're cut off, like stunted emotionally. They have no emotional depth to them because they don't take part in much. You know what I mean? Their whole experience in the world is through computers and through texting each other. My kids don't even call their friends. They text.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To me, it's crazy. My daughter's like, I've been texting my boyfriend all day. I can't get in touch with him. I'm like, well, call him. And she looks at me like, come on, Dad, that's so old school, you know. But
whatever. I get it. I get that.
But I really feel like that is what's missing from music now. That's why that's why Disney pop is so popular now. You know what I mean? It's because that whole. My son is 17. By the time I was his age, I had already been smoking and drinking and hanging out with girls and stuff for years. You know what I mean? I was already a man at his age. You know, I was a man. I was already experienced in the world, and it worries me because he's not. You know what I mean? He's not. And I think to myself, like, oh my God, what is this kid going to do when he get out? But I realize he's no different than any other kids in his school.
No.
You know what I mean? There's probably a couple of kids, but for the most part, he's very typical of kids his age, and that gives me a little bit of relief. But it's that's, in my opinion, you know, that's the problem with music now, and that's why I'm really hoping that I can you know, get the kids' attention and get them out to a show and get them to see and feel what it's like when you know what you sing and what you play contains all your experiences from your life. And that doesn't mean they have to go out and drink and do drugs and fucking go wild, but do something that gives you some kind of, you know, don't be afraid to experience things and get out and just do it.
Yeah, true. And you're absolutely nailed on the head. The problem with today's society is that they sit on their backside, get lazy, and like here in Australia, when I was growing up as a kid, I was into the Black Sabbath, Van Halen, Def Leppard, Kiss, all that metal. I was a metalhead and rockhead, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But the thing is, when we got told not to do that thing anymore, like play in the backyard or play cricket or racquetball or baseball in your backyard, when we got told not to do that anymore, that's when we started to become lazy, and that's when the new technology of the iPhones and the smartphones and the Android, all that. I mean, I remember sitting in the house with my loved one, my ex-girlfriend, mind you.
Yeah.
I'm in the bedroom. She's in the lounge room. She texts me and says, dinner's ready. I say, why didn't you come to the bedroom and tell me? I mean, today's technology and the way that people are learning, I mean, especially in education. When I was back at school and when you were younger, you mentioned you were a man at 17. I was a man at 15. But the thing is, we grow up too quick, but when we look back at time, what we got taught at school in education, today's modern society, they will not have a clue who was the first president of the United States or who's the first prime minister of Australia. We do. But the social media and the technology out there had become a new trend for these people to become lazy. And it all started here in Australia when we got told you can't do this. What was right back then is wrong now, and what was wrong back there is right now, and that's the problem. But going back into the music, I believe, in my honest opinion, that a lot of the music fans, whether it's punk, rock, metal, the Disney pop, I think a lot of people put a lot of bands in pigeonholes. If it's not punk, we won't listen to the heaviest side. If it's not thrash metal, or we're not listening to the pop rock glam, that's the problem that I see right across the board. And what really gets me inspiring is the bands that are coming out from Europe, and that market is flooding the world. I've got albums last year that I never believe I'll ever have, because it opened my eyes and ears, not just to fix what's happening here in Australia, because it did go underground for a bit, but now it's sprouting up all over the place here in Australia. But I'm mainly focused on the European market, and it just goes from there probably to America probably in the next couple of years, and it'll come back to Australia. It just goes around. But what comes out of Europe right now, they are strong. That music market in Europe right now is very, very strong at the moment.
Because it definitely isn't. There definitely ain't much going on here right now. That's a fact. There's just not much going on in the States, musically anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't follow the X Factor or that, because I believe that they're ripping off the artists that in the garage or in their basement writing a song and trying to get a record deal. But these ones that get on the talent shows, they've got 17 other co-writers writing the album. They're making a quid, and once they make the quid, they go off and you never see them again. I hate that. It's ripping the music industry off in my book, because you guys been there from day one, and now look at it. I see it being in a mess because of the karaoke. Now, I'm not saying karaoke's wrong, but when you got talent shows on TV where they just want to make $1 million, they don't care about the business. That's what I really hate about it. That's what I really do.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things, man. They just kind of have they figured out the formula, I guess I would say, and they now that they've got the formula down, they're just burying the whole scene. They really, really are. Because some of these kids that you hear, especially like all the the little pop kids, you listen to it and you're like, wow, this kid's really got a great voice, until you understand that they have good voices, but they're in the studio with millions of dollars behind them and auto-tune and all this other stuff that makes them sound great when they're really not great. They're good. Yeah. They're just good, and they're getting picked for their looks and stuff like that, and they're just being, it's like these people are creating their personas and all of this stuff, and And it's kind of always been that way, you know, to a certain extent. But now that really has just taken over. It's just completely taken over.
Well, especially when the Ramones started, when they wore the black leathers, that was a new look, and everybody started to wear that. Especially when the Sex Pistols came out, they had all spiked their hair. You had the punk wearing the necklace and the ear pierce and nose pierce and dog collars. That was a fashion trend, and it just went on to the 80s. You had the spandex, you had the bouffant hairdo, whatever you want to call it, and it just kept going. But you're right, they look for something. If it's an X factor in looks, bang, we'll get you. If you're not, don't. You know, I'm overweight. They're not going to look at me.
Hey, that's all right. That's that was the big joke when I first started playing again was, you know, my whether or not you're gonna get rid of the gray and lose a couple of pounds, blah blah blah. And I always say, you know what, I've never been about that type of stuff. I don't give a crap. I get up on stage, I do what I do, and I do it how I want to do it, and that's it. You know what I mean? I could care less. I could care less if I got gray hair and I'm overweight. I don't give a rat's ass. I get up to have fun and try to keep it going and try to keep it alive, you know, keep the spirit alive, and that's my mission. That's all I really care about. I feel stupid and cheap getting up there with dyed hair and clothes that somebody else bought for me and trying to look young and all. You know, it's just not honest, you know, and it sure as hell ain't punk.
Yeah. I've got 2 questions to go before we wrap it up. We've got 45 minutes in this interview at the moment. The question is, have you got a Spinal Tap moment where being on your own, performing on your own, or with the Ramones?
Probably the best, you know, the obvious one is my first time on stage with the Ramones. That's obvious, like, you know, most obvious answer. But I think probably the absolute coolest thing I've ever done was at the Ramones' last show when we did the song that Lemmy wrote for the Ramones. Lemmy came out on stage and stood right next to me, and me and him both playing bass together played that song, and he sang the harmonies, and that was probably one of the best moments of my entire career was standing next to him and doing that. That's a tough one to top, you know what I mean? There aren't too many people in the world that I really, you know, I would feel that way about playing next to. I mean, I'd be really psyched to play with a lot of people, but you know, playing with Lemmy really just kind of, it was probably the best moment for me on stage. Yeah.
We're going back onto the Australian tour. You're going to be joined with featuring members of the Adolescents and Street Dogs. You're starting out on the 6th of February at the Brisbane Hotel in Hobart. Not many bands go to Tasmania, and you're one of them. You're going there. And you're coming to Adelaide on the 10th of February. You're going to Canberra, Sydney, Brisbane, Footscray, and Collingwood. I'm a Collingwood supporter in the Aussie Rules football, where it's called aerial ping pong, depends where you come from. But it's played on a round oval with a square ball. That's how you name it. But yeah, you're playing at the Bendigo Hotel, an awesome venue. The Bendigo, I've been there, and it's absolutely great beer there. So don't get too drunk, I should say. But
all right.
But it's just the first time you play with the Adolescents and Street Dogs.
The guys from the Adolescents, Steve Soto and Dan Root, have been with me for a couple of years now. Steve has actually co-produced both my solo records, and him and Dan pretty much are full-time members, except, you know, their first priority is the Adolescents. But the Adolescents only tour during the summer months, in the summer months in the States, and they have off pretty much for the rest of the year. So they come out with me just about every tour. And I've kind of had a revolving lineup of drummers, but right now I'm using Pete Sosa from the Street Dogs, who's coming with me on this one.
It's going to be awesome. And tickets are still available at all those dates that I just mentioned. And you're coming to Adelaide, where I am. You're going to the Crown and Anchor, which is in the city. And one last thing before we wrap it up, to say to the fans down under, Ramone. CJ, I should say.
Say that again?
Any last thing you'd like to say to the fans down under?
Oh, yeah. Last words, Ramones forever.
Yeah. All right, guys. That's all we've got time for. I want to say thanks, CJ. It's a bucket list for me. I've got many of them. But stay on the phone. I just want to wrap it up. Go to the event page on Facebook. It's on our wall. It's on Blood, Sweat and Metal. You'll see the advertisement there. Get your tickets at all these events, because this is not a gig not to be missed. I've got to get there. I've got to do a review. I've got to see CJ. I've got to shake his hand. Also, give him some kind words in face-to-face. But,
all right,
guys, get your tickets, and we're going to play some Ramones songs and some awesome news more into this episode, because there's so much we can talk about. But thank you, CJ. Stay on the phone, and I'll say to the fans, stay thirsty, and we'll get you back next week on Blood, Sweat and Metal. Catch you later.